Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Book Review. In the past episodes, we covered a variety of topics and a variety of books. Today's topic is very special. In the meantime, a Muslim can be acquainted with the pillars of Islam and with faith and basic knowledge to practice his religion. But this is not enough for being steadfast in one's religion. Our book for today is Means of Steadfastness in Islam for Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid. We're proud and pleased to have with us to review this book our very special Sheikh, Sheikh Abdurrahim McCarthy. Sheikh Abdurrahim McCarthy is the Islamic teacher in Dubai and the Khatib of Masjid Al-Manar in the Quran Center and the Khatib of Tiffany Masjid in Dubai. Sheikh Abdurrahim is also a graduate of the Islamic University in Medina, and he is known for his lectures in the West and Europe in particular. Sheikh Abdurrahim, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Jazakallah khairan, we really appreciate it. Sheikh Abdurrahim, Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid, the author of this book, mentions 15 means to steadfastness. Let's start by talking about the first way that he mentions, which is turning towards the Quran. Can you expand on this?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Before we go into the first point, I think that the viewers need to know who is Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid if they don't know. And Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid, he is the founder and the one behind IslamQA.com, which no doubt is one of the best, if not the best website on the internet when it comes to the issue of fatwa and going back to fatwa, and so many different languages and so beneficial and so in depth. And all the viewers should check out the website. And the Sheikh, may Allah bless him, he's actually the one behind this. So Sheikh Muhammad, he has several good books. His lectures are very good, his audio lectures as well.
He's living in Dammam.
In Dammam in Saudi Arabia, in the eastern province now. So what he is, in this book here, The Means of Staying Steadfast. And this book, it stood out to me because one of the first lectures I ever gave when I had graduated the Islamic University in Medina was The Means of Staying Steadfast. And actually, I just gave it again recently. Obviously, throughout the years, you changed some things about it. And I mentioned 10 points of how to stay steadfast upon your religion. And here we have 15. So perhaps, inshallah, we can add this, inshallah, to my lecture as well later, inshallah. The first you mentioned is
turning to the Quran.
Turning to the Quran. What I said in my lecture was living with the Quran. Living by the Quran, which is the same meaning at the end, right? Turning towards the Quran, living with the Quran, meaning that the Quran becomes part of your life, becomes part of who you are. You want to stay steadfast, you're constantly living with the Quran. The Quran is a source of guidance. Alif Lam Mim Dhalika al-Kitab La Rayba Fihi Hudan lil-Muttaqeen. This is the book that was sent as Huda, as guidance to the Muttaqeen, guidance to those who have taqwa. It's a source of guidance. And it guides you every step of the way in your life. When you need something, you listen to it, you hear it in the Quran. When you want to know which way to go, you find it in the Quran. So the Quran, if you're going to stay steadfast, you're going to stay firm upon your religion, it has to become part of your life. It has to become your DNA. The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The manners, your actions, how you act as a Muslim. As Aisha radiallahu anha said that the manners or the khuluq of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was that of the Quran. So you have to look at your manners and see, is it that of the Quran or not?
But I think that requires that the person just not only reads the Quran, but also knows the meaning and the tafsir of the Quran. What do you think?
Well, reading the Quran is the first thing. You get the ajr. And learning how to read it properly, you get the ajr. You get the reward for that. Listening to the Quran. And I think we don't pay close enough attention. Allah sometimes open up ways for us the early Muslims didn't have, where we can constantly be listening to the Quran, constantly be listening to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, going back and forth and coming. And you know that when you've had that hard day at work, you've had that difficult day, you got a little bit of argument with your boss, that when you get into your car and you put on the Quran, how it puts you into that zone, into that tranquility, and you relax. And all of the problems is like it just drifts away from you. All of us have felt that. When you put it into your iPad and you listen to it or your telephone and listen to the Quran, it increases you and it gives you that sakina, that tranquility, just to listen to it. But obviously the key thing when it comes to the Quran is not just listening or reading,
So
understanding the meanings and then acting upon them.
Exactly.
Is the key thing.
He then moves to the second way that he mentions, adhering to the laws of Allah and doing righteous deeds.
This is the story of the Muslim. This is the way of the Muslim.
Okay.
وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد ضل ضلالا مبينا. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us that it's not up to the believing male or female. If Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have decreed something in our affair, meaning in our religion, that we have a choice. Meaning that we have to say, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا, we hear and we obey. So when we adhere to the Quran and Sunnah, it becomes part of our life. Every move we make, it's according to the Quran and to the Sunnah. Everything we do, it's according to the Quran and to the Sunnah. This is what has to, if you're going to stay steadfast, this is what has to be. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us, I have left behind with you that which if you hold firm to, you'll never go astray after me. The book of Allah and my Sunnah.
Interesting. Then he moves to the third mean, which is studying the stories of the prophets and the followers of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Yes, salam. And this one I didn't mention in my lecture, and I'm definitely going to add it when I was reflecting on the book. Inshallah ta'ala. When you look into the stories of the Sahaba and the early Muslims, and how they strove for Islam, how they strove for the deen, how they sacrificed. You look at yourself and you belittle yourself, first of all. You say, what have I done for this deen? And at the same time, it inspires you when you see all they went through, all they gave up.
All the sacrifices they made.
And I'll mention one quick story, just as an example. And a lot of people don't reflect on this story. The story of Suhaib al-Rumi, radiallahu anhu, when he migrated from Mecca to Medina. Suhaib was a businessman, and he was put basically on house arrest by Quraysh, so he couldn't slip off to Medina. Why? Because they didn't want the money to go. They want the money to stay there. And if he's just spending inside the city, it's going to be beneficial for the economy of Mecca. So they don't want him to go outside. So he runs away. Then in the middle of the night, he sneaks off. They chase him. And know the story when he got up onto the mountain, and he was a professional archer. And he told him, he said, look, if you come up, he said, you know I don't miss if I shoot.
Subhanallah.
He said, there's 30 of you, of the Quraysh soldiers who are traveling. And he said, I have 30 arrows. And he said, all of you know, and he's from a vertical range as well, makes it even better for him. And he said, as you know, if I shoot, I don't miss. He was a professional archer. He said, but what I'll do, I'll make a deal with you. That if you let me go to Medina and you turn your back, then I'll tell you where my money is hidden, where I have it buried in Mecca. He said, go to this door, you'll find it buried under this door. Go to this place, you'll find it buried under this tree. So he gave him all of his money and lost all of his money because he wanted the pleasure of Allah and to be with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say when he entered into the masjid? He said, رَبِحَ الْبَيْءَ أَبَا يَحْيَا. That he was successful in the transaction he made, Abu Yahya, his kunya, that he was successful in the transaction he made by doing that. So when you read these type of stories about how they strove and he left the dunya, left all the money, left all the khair and the good he had just for Allah and His Messenger ﷺ, and that is the true and the best transaction that's going to inspire you to strive along the path, inshallah.
Subhanallah, and the stories are a lot of the Sahaba, but this is just an example.
Yes.
He then moves to the fourth mean of steadfastness, dua, supplication.
Yes, and
that's very important. We want to just like talk about that.
We don't realize the effect of the dua.
And expand the talk about it because it's very important nowadays.
We don't realize the effect of the dua. The Prophet ﷺ described it as the silah, which is what? The weapon of the believer. This is the weapon you have that we don't use.
All the temptations and all the
this is your weapon.
Surrounding us.
Because we have to realize that we're weak. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the strong one.
We have nothing except the dua.
لا حول ولا قوة لنا إلا به سبحانه وتعالى. We have no strength and no ability except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Exactly.
So we need to turn to Him. And the dua, when you raise your hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it shows you that you're the one in need. And it shows you our need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This reminds us, and this attaches our heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why just the dua itself, and constantly turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and constantly begging to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is going to help us, inshallah ta'ala, stay firm, inshallah ta'ala, on the religion of Allah, inshallah ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his dua, he used to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma ya muqallib al-qulub ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. Oh Allah, the controller of the hearts, make our hearts firm upon your religion. Salama radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said this is the most dua he used to make. So this shows us the importance of making dua to stay firm, to stay steadfast. ربنا, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا. Oh our Lord, do not let our hearts go astray after you have guided us.
Amazing. The remembrance of dhikr, of Allah. And he talks in this fifth mean of steadfastness about adhkar and about saying the regularly saying the adhkar of the sabah and of the masa, of the morning and the evening. Let's expand on this a little bit.
The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only way for the believer to find salvation, to find peace of heart, to find peace of mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Verily, through the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find assurance. Everybody in this dunya today, when you see the people who are out partying at the nightclubs, drinking alcohol, using drugs, fornicating, when you ask them, what are you looking for? They say, want to be happy. But do they find it? No.
They don't.
That's why these are people who end up making suicide. The people end up having mental illnesses because they're looking for a source of happiness where they can only find it through the remembrance of Allah. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضْ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, then he will live a difficult life. He will live a miserable life. And this is the reality of those who turn away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the companions, we talk about the importance of the dhikr, one of the companions came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to him, he asked him for advice to guide him, to turn him. So give him, and when you want that one piece of advice, you want that one thing that's very strong.
Exactly.
That you know that you can benefit in your life. He said, لا يزال لسانك رطبا بذكر الله. That your tongue should constantly stay moist with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he trained us about how easy some dhikrs can be and how much reward they have. He said, كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. That's two sentences or two words that they're very light on the tongue, very easy to say, but they're very pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Ar-Rahman, and very heavy on the scale. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu udhkur Allah. Oh, you who believe, remember Allah. What does he say at the end, subhanahu wa ta'ala? He could have stopped there. So remember Allah. He said, dhikran kathira. Abundantly remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the importance that we constantly remember Allah. And through the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every step he takes. You mentioned the morning remembrance, how important that is, and the evening remembrance. When you go into the bathroom, you have a supplication. When you exit the bathroom, you have a supplication. When you enter the masjid, when you go to sleep, when you put your clothes on, when you wake up. So all these supplications, everything you do, when you leave the house, when you enter the house, all of this trains the Muslim to constantly be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To constantly remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Subhanallah.
One of the most key things is stay steadfast on the religion.
Sheikh, we will continue the rest of the means of steadfastness after the break. Dear brothers and sisters, we will take a short break and we'll be right back, so stay tuned to Book Review. Welcome back, brothers and sisters. We are talking about the means of steadfastness in Islam for Sheikh Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid. We are pleased and pleasured to have with us Sheikh Abdul Rahim McCarthy. Sheikh, welcome back. Sheikh, we stopped at the sixth mean of steadfastness that the Sheikh mentioned here, striving to follow the correct way.
The correct way, which is the way of the Quran and Sunnah. So it's very similar to...
What does he say? What does he mean by striving to...
The fact of striving is you have to try.
Okay.
Not
constantly
try.
Okay.
And even if, for example, if you want to get to the straight path, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, it's not something that's going to come easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He surrounded the Jannah by things that are difficult and surrounded the hellfire by desire and by lust in order to test His creation. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We're here to be tested, to see which one of us is best indeed. So it's going to be difficult, but you have to strive. But you have a promise. You have a guarantee from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you strive. And the same word the Shaykh here used. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Pay attention to the strength of this ayah, subhanAllah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who strive for us, those who struggle for us, verily we will guide them to our ways. And verily Allah will be with the doers of good.
MashaAllah.
So if you're going to strive, you're going to struggle for Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will guide you to the way. But you have to make that effort. You have to make that strong stance and start. If you're not going to start, you're not going to struggle and strive, you're not going to reach your goal.
He then moves to training and education, and that's the 7th.
The tarbiyah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was the perfect role model for this, in training and educating the companions. Educating yourself first and foremost.
But this is does this education only include the deen only, or does it also include all education?
When we're talking about staying steadfast upon the religion.
Okay, so it's the
So in this situation, obviously other forms of education are important in Islam. Being successful engineers, being successful
doctors. But I mean, when education
lawyers.
is mentioned, it
But
means
here in this
knowledge of the deen.
Here in this particular case, we're talking about staying steadfast on the religion. So no doubt here what education means is on the deen.
Okay.
And in having knowledge of the religion, understanding your religion, knowing the reward for that. قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say, are those equal to those who know, to those who know not? It's not equal, obviously.
Exactly.
Allah makes it very clear in this ayah. So we need to learn our religion. And the issue of the tarbiyah is constantly training ourselves, looking into how the Prophet ﷺ used to train the companions. And look here in this book and read in some of these examples of how the Prophet ﷺ used to train the companions and teach them and how to follow the straight path. And then for us to act upon this, inshallah ta'ala.
He then moves to having confidence in the path you're following.
The yaqeen. When you have certainty that this is the correct path, that this is the correct way, that this is the only way, that this is the way that leads to Jannah, you have this certainty, the hardships that are going to come on the path are not going to affect you. Now, what stops a Muslim from fornicating? Now, all throughout the world,
they're sure that that this is haram, and that they will get rewarded for leaving it, and they'll get punished if they do it.
Because a Muslim man is no different when it comes to his lust and desires to a non-Muslim man. He wants the same thing. But the yaqeen, the certainty we have, and the fear we have of being punished if we go against this certainty is what keeps us firm on the path and lets us, inshallah ta'ala, not fall into that.
He then moves to da'wah. After he mentions having confidence in your path and knowledge of the path, then he moves to da'wah. Can you expand on this?
And this is the same methodology that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us and trained us with as Muslims in the Quran, Surah Al-Asr.
But I mean, how can da'wah benefit you on being steadfast on the deen?
Because when you have this certainty, it propels you immediately to call others to this. When you have this certainty, you want the others to feel the certainty. When you have this khair, this good, you want the others to feel it. So when you're calling to that good, that's going to also increase your certainty. It's going to increase you holding on to what you're calling to because you believe in it. Okay. So when you're calling to that, it's going to help you, inshallah, as well, stay firm on the path, inshallah.
I get it. Let's move on to the next one. Keeping close to people who help you to be steadfast.
Yes, all throughout the Quran, all throughout the Sunnah, you're going to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you, ittaqullah wa kunu ma'a sadiqin. Fear Allah and be with those who are truthful. The Prophet said, Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. The person is on the religion of his friend. So when you're with somebody who's pious, you're with somebody who's striving to stay steadfast, at the same time, they're going to call you to stay steadfast. But if it was somebody else who's following the lust and desires of this dunya, he's going to call you to follow the same thing.
SubhanAllah. The next one is very good also. He says, being confident of the help of Allah and that the future belongs to Islam.
This is very, very important, especially in the days we live in. Because so many people, either there's one of two. People who try to be in a hurry to make the things happen, and they cause more harm than good to Islam and to the Muslims. Trying to be in a hurry, make the victory come when the time is not right.
I agree with
by using means that are un-Islamic for that victory, thus harming the Muslims and Islam, giving Islam a bad name in this. Or other people who, when they see how bad it is, they kind of just drift away and leave the religion or don't practice religion because they think the victory is not coming. So you need to be confident. You know, Ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. Ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. That verily the nasr, the victory of Allah is close, inshallah.
SubhanAllah. He says after that, understanding the reality on falsehood and not being misled by that.
Very good. The Muslim has to know what is falsehood. It's not just enough to know the haqq.
It's also important to know the falsehood.
Exactly. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, he said, كان الناس يسألون عن الخير وكنت أسأل عن الشر مخافة أن يدركني. Hudayfa, he's the role model for us in this. He's the one who taught us what we need to do. Radiallahu anhu. He said the people used to ask the Prophet ﷺ about the good, but I would ask about the evil. Why, Hudayfa? So it wouldn't catch me, so I wouldn't fall into it. Because if you don't know the evil, you're going to be caught by and fall into it.
Then he says, acquiring the characteristics that will help one to remain steadfast. What are these characteristics?
There's so many of them. From is being truthful, the issues of ibadah, And there's several things you're going to find here in the book when you go back and read it. I want the readers to read into the book.
Okay.
But the point is these characteristics.
But what is the most important in your opinion of these characteristics? Is it ibadah or is it something else?
The sincerity to Allah.
But I mean at the time of fitan,
following the Prophet.
Okay.
And obviously the ibadah, no doubt, is one of the key things, because the Prophet, he said, "Badiru bil a'mali fitna," to race the fitnas before they come with your acts of worship. So no doubt these things, it's a way of life. Also knowledge is one of the keys as well, and training yourself as a Muslim is going to be with the characters that help you out to stay firm, inshallah.
Lastly, he mentions thinking about the delights of paradise and the punishments of hellfire.
Yes, no doubt this is going to have the big effect on you, because when you're on this path and the shayateen are trying to pull you off right and left, trying to pull you off the path, and you're thinking about the goal, the hadith that you're going to, which is the Jannah, and the light you're going to be getting there. And when you want to fall, and shaitan, he tricks you, and you're going to go, and you say, you remember the torment of the hellfire, the possibility you could be tortured there, you could be dwelling there with him if you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what keeps you firm on the path, inshallah ta'ala.
He then mentions the situations where one should stay steadfast. He mentions times of trial and tribulation. And then steadfastness in al-jihad, steadfastness in the Islamic way of life, steadfastness at the time of death. Let's expand on the last one.
At the time of death, and even at the times of calamities. Why? Because it's easy to be firm when everything's good, everything's rosy.
But at the time of death,
at the time of death,
I think there's nothing in your hand.
Because at the time of death, that's what people don't realize. And يثبت الله الذين آمنوا بالقول الثابت في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة.
But it's a result of all that you have done in your life.
Allah is going to keep you firm. Allah is going to keep you steadfast at the time of death. For example, when you say La ilaha illallah. When you say La ilaha illallah, He's going to keep you firm, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you are not steadfast, you're not striving, it's very difficult. The people who are working in hospitals or in ambulances, when we hear their stories, they say, how many people, they don't have the ability to say La ilaha when they're dying. They can't say it because their life has not been La ilaha illallah.
Exactly.
But those who are striving for La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, it comes on their tongue naturally at the time of death. So Allah keeps them firm and He keeps them on the iman, because it's very easy at that time when people are scared, when the angel of death is ripping the soul out of the body, may Allah protect all of us, that they could go away or say something other than what they should be saying and die upon that. May Allah protect all of us from that.
Sheikh Abdurrahim McCarthy, I would like to thank you at the end of this episode. Jazakallah khairan for giving us your time. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khairan for watching this very interesting and amazing episode of Book Review. Till the next episode, until I see you in the next time, with the permission of Allah, I leave you in the care of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.